This video is sponsored by the Cult of Lane. If you know, you know. The world of sports right now is, how do I put this lightly? It's on fire. The sports world is on fire right now. You've got soccer teams in Europe illegally spending money. You've got baseball teams in America just flat out cheating and robbing teams of championships and ruining the world of baseball. You've got fiery NASCAR crashes that are putting people in the hospital. And honestly, the only thing that is keeping the sports world afloat right now is the XFL. Allow me to explain. The worst period of the sports season is the window from after the Super Bowl until MLB season starts. And it's even worse at the start during the NBA All-Star break, because there's literally nothing on except one thing: XFL football. I have been excited about this league's return since I found out about it. The XFL was only a myth to people as young as me a few years ago. It had one fantastic season and then it went away, and then Vince McMahon said, let's try this again. And about 2 decades later, he took his time, he got his investors together, he did it right. Vince McMahon did it right this time, and now the XFL is thriving, and I am loving every single second of it. 2 games every Saturday, 2 games every Sunday, on TV stations that everybody gets: ESPN, Fox Sports 1, ABC. I'm sure I'm missing one in there somewhere. But, oh man, I've been wanting to make this video for weeks, and I just cannot pour out enough love for the XFL because it is amazing. It is already doing better than the AAF ever did. For those of you who remember that failed football league from last year, the AAF, it just flat out didn't have good ratings and it ran out of money. But this time around, we've got names that we recognize from college, from the NFL, even some guys from the AAF. So, pardon me if I'm looking down at my phone here, but last night, the day before I recorded this, I compiled a list of my XFL power rankings of the teams I've looked at. Now, before I continue into this, I'm not the expert. You do not have to take my opinion seriously, but those of you regulars around here know that my opinion doesn't really mean much. So, I'm no expert. I've just compiled what I've seen from game that I've watched, from Instagram pages, from the XFL app, statistics and stories, and all of that other good stuff. I'm going to do these power rankings in reverse. So, there are 8 XFL teams. There are the Tampa Bay Vipers, LA Wildcats, New York Guardians, Dallas Renegades, Seattle Dragons, St. Louis Battlehawks, Houston Roughnecks, and my favorite team, the DC Defenders, who are kicking butt, by the way, and are number 1 in my ranking. I'm not biased. I will get to that in a minute. The clear bottom feeder of this league already is the Tampa Bay Vipers, and it is not even close. In the 2 games they have played, they have scored 1 touchdown, and it was on a pick 6. I'm not sure what their quarterback situation is per se, but they have already used 3 quarterbacks in 2 games. They have thrown a combined 5 interceptions. That's not good. That's very bad. And they fumbled the ball a bunch too. Week 1 against the New York Guardians, they were awful. They got into the red zone 5 times. They kicked a field goal 1 time, and then they turned it over the other 4. It was horrendous. It was hard for me to watch. The other thing is, even when they do get the ball off into a receiver's hands that's not a defender, the receivers just flat out drop it. From what I've seen, that half of the passes that are thrown to the receivers are just flat out dropped. And I've seen that around the league a little bit, but it is very prominent with the Tampa Bay Vipers. The only good thing that I can, well, I'm going to go 3 things. Or, yeah, you can see that. 3 things. Most of which I found out last night. This is a developing story. So first of all, they have a decent run game. They have 2 running backs over 100 yards in the first 2 weeks, which isn't bad. And they managed to keep the Seattle Dragons close in Seattle. And Seattle's home crowd was absolutely packed this weekend. XFL stadiums, some of them are in soccer stadiums, some of them are in normal football stadiums. The normal football stadiums are only allowed to sell so many tickets, but the Seattle crowd was by far the most impressive one in a football stadium. They sold out all their seats that were allowed, about 30,000 people. So it was pretty impressive. But Tampa Bay managed to keep them close, and it took until the final play where they threw an interception to seal the game. So they just traded for a wide receiver, S.J. Green, who was in the Canadian Football League. And the reason this is interesting is because he has worked with the current Vipers head coach, Mark Trestman, a lot in the past. Now, if that name sounds familiar to some of you, Mark Trestman was the short-lived coach of the Chicago Bears back in, I want to say 2014, 2015. Don't fact-check me on that, but it's been a few years. Mark Trestman did not do well in the NFL, and he is continuing his pattern in Tampa Bay. Do not expect this team to make a run anytime soon. They'll be lucky to go 300. Number 7 on the list, the only other winless team in the league, the LA Wildcats. So I'm just going to start out with this. Bold take. Do not count the LA Wildcats out. Do not let their 0-2 record fool you. This is a very good football team that's just had a bad brush of luck with injuries and coaching personnel. Let me get into that. So their week 1 game was against the Houston Roughnecks, who are higher up on the power rankings. They gave up, their defense was horrendous. They gave up a bunch of touchdowns, a bunch of burnt coverages, and they just flat out fired their defensive coordinator after that game. So they swapped out their defensive coordinator. They traded their best defender, Anthony Johnson. Is that his name? I should know that. He's on the DC Defenders. Let me look at my notes here. Yeah, Anthony Johnson. He's a defensive lineman. They traded him to DC the day before the week 2 game. But in week 2, they kept the Dallas Renegades close with their 3rd-string quarterback, Josh Johnson. I personally know Josh Johnson's talent because he was on the Redskins last year. Let's not talk about the Redskins last year. And by last year, I'm referring to the 2018 season. Oh, scary times. But Josh Johnson looked very, very sharp on this past game. He had a really nice bullet pass between 2 defenders for a touchdown, and he just played an overall solid game. They kept the Renegades close, and yeah. They also have the league's leading receiver, Nelson Spruce. Now, one cool thing about the game on Saturday or Sunday, whenever it was, Todd Gurley and another Rams player, I don't remember which one, but Todd Gurley came in. He was interviewed on the sideline of the Wildcats, and the reporter asked him, "Who are you watching?" Nelson Spruce, wide receiver. And sure enough, Spruce caught 2 touchdowns just this last game, and he leads the league in receiving yards. So keep your eyes on Nelson Spruce. He is due to have a breakout season. They may be second to last on my power rankings, but if they fine-tune a couple of things, I could see them sneaking into the playoffs. I think that they can pull that off if they get an offense established and just have a half-decent defense. Number 6 on the rankings, the New York Guardians. Now, they had a very, very polar opposite week 1 and week 2. I will explain. They are led by quarterback Matt McGloin, who was a regular bench warmer in the NFL for a few teams. And week 1, he looked absolutely amazing. But keep in mind, they played the Tampa Bay Vipers at home. McGloin threw for, I believe, over 300 yards, multiple touchdowns, and he just looked sharp overall, hit a lot of hard passes, shook away a couple defenders on some nice plays. It was pretty cool to watch. But then this last weekend, he looked absolutely horrible. He went something crazy like 8 for 18, like 40 some yards and 2 interceptions, but that was against the DC Defenders in DC. So they've had a very different week 1 and week 2. And the thing that concerns me as far as analyzing this team is Matt McGloin was visibly frustrated in his week 2 loss against DC. He was whining about calls all game. He was chewing out. He seemed angry with his coach, and he just seemed completely distraught. He said to a reporter that it was probably one of the roughest games that he had ever played. And the Guardians sit at 1-1 right now, but I was tempted to put them down with the 0-2 teams. But when I was compiling my power rankings, I considered record in the factor. But right now, I like the Wildcats better than the Guardians as far as chances, because the Guardians were in complete disarray. They got shut out, and their offense is completely one-dimensional. They have virtually no run game, no consistent run game at least. They managed to scrape together 60 or so yards last game, but that was with a combined 3 or 4 guys. So if I were a Guardians fan, I would be panicking because they looked very, very off this last game, and if they don't get it figured out soon, they're going to be a bottom feeder with the Vipers. Number 5, the Dallas Renegades, and since they are a Dallas team, I automatically don't like them. But again, I'm unbiased in these rankings, so this is the most intriguing team in the league for a bunch of reasons. At the beginning of the year, they were favored to win the entire thing. They're favored to win the XFL championship. They're first in the ranking. And they have the quarterback coach duo of Bob Stoops and Landry Jones, the legendary Oklahoma duo. Now, the thing is, Landry Jones was hurt week 1 when the Renegades played the Battlehawks. And the Battlehawks managed to win that game by a couple points. But in that loss, Dallas looked very good. Honestly, Dallas looked better in their loss than they did in their win against the Wildcats this last week. Because when Landry Jones came back, he threw for over 300 yards, but he also had some very sloppy passes, 2 interceptions. If I remember correctly, I think there was a fumble that had something to do with a handoff or him just falling down or something like that, if I remember that correctly. They also have a really nice running back. His name is Cameron Artis-Payne. He had a 99-yard performance against LA. He had 2 touchdowns. He was the one who kind of put the game on ice this last week. So he is another player to watch. Again, they lost their first game to St. Louis at home, but then they went to LA and won on the road. I honestly thought that they looked better in their loss against St. Louis, even though they were dealing with a backup quarterback. Their defense was much more solid. The fourth quarter of the Wildcats Renegades game kind of got out of hand scoring-wise. I believe the score was like 6-3 at the end of the third quarter, and then the fourth quarter, both teams opened up the scoring. So that was kind of a weird game to watch. But if Dallas can get their offense figured out under Stoops and Jones, and if they play half-decent defense, then they will be in the championship game. If they can get their offense firing on all cylinders, they will be in the championship game. Number 4 on the rankings, the Seattle Dragons. This team also intrigues me because there's nothing eye-popping about them from what I have seen, but they just play fundamental football. They've done very well. They lost week 1 against the Defenders, who are, in my opinion, the best defensive team in the league by far, but they still put up 19 points against them. And then they managed to eke out that week 2 win against the Vipers at home. And like I stated earlier in the video, their home crowd was just absolutely insane. 30,000 strong at CenturyLink Field, where the Seahawks play. Their offense is a bit spotty at times, but when their offense is good, they can drone down the field and score a touchdown, as I've seen a couple times. But I see them as more of the middle of the pack team. There's nothing special about them. Their quarterback, his name is Silvers. He has a few more interceptions than you would like, but other than that, he's not doing bad. So if Silvers can limit the turnovers that he enforces, then I think the Dragons could be a middle of the pack team, and if push comes to shove, they could make the playoffs if they make a run. But I see them as more of a middle-of-the-pack team at this point, hence why I have them kind of in the middle of my power rankings. Now things get interesting. Number 3, the St. Louis Battlehawks. This is my second favorite team in the league because of Iowa State left tackle Jake Campos, who is a starting lineman for them. And they also have a quarterback nicknamed the Throwing Samoan. His name is Jordan Ta'amu, and he honestly reminds me of Marcus Mariota because he's a mobile quarterback. He's a bigger guy. He's got a good arm. He is the third best quarterback in the league, in my opinion. He's doing very well. He runs very well. He hands the ball off to his running backs as well. The offense is very fluid. And who was their Week 2 loss to? They lost to Houston in Week 2, but they kept it very close. It was a 28-24 final score. They played a good game. They hung with the big boy until the end. And this is a team that people should be afraid of because of Jordan Ta'amu. And their defense isn't great, but if their defense can turn it up a notch, then this can be a playoff team for sure. The way that the playoff format works in this league is that there's 4 teams, 2 on each side, and I think it's out of each division. I'm not sure 100% on that, but I think they can be a 3 seed in a 4-team playoff if they keep doing what they're doing. And there are only 2 undefeated teams left in the league. The Houston Roughnecks are my number 2 because of one simple thing. Their quarterback, PJ Walker. Walker looks like Deshaun Watson. He's mobile in the pocket. He has a cannon arm. He's made some acrobatic plays to escape sacks. He had this one throw where he started going above and then the lineman jumped, and at the last second, he turned his arm and fired it sideways. Completely accurate. He's scored a touchdown to his receiver. He leads the league in touchdowns. He has 7 through 2 weeks. That first week was against that weak LA defense, but that second week was against the third ranked in my rankings, the St. Louis Battlehawks. So PJ Walker has looked very impressive. And he also threw a hat trick of touchdowns, which means 3 touchdowns for you not sports savvy people, with Cam Phillips. Cam Phillips was named the XFL Player of the Week this morning. At the morning I'm recording this, he had, I believe, 8 catches, 63 yards, and 3 touchdowns, if I remember correctly. Cam Phillips is also another guy to watch. He is the number 1 weapon for PJ Walker at this time. But there was one scary stat that I saw about this team, their third down percentage. They are 5 for 20 on the season, a dismal 25%. That is not good for them. If they may be 2-0, but if they start facing tougher teams like DC and Seattle with better defenses, then they need to improve that third down percentage. But other than that, they are a very good team. I could see them being a middle seed in a 4-team playoff. And then, number 1 in the rankings, my favorite team, the DC Defenders. Man, this team is so fun to watch. I've been a Redskins fan for years, and I'm going to be blunt. The Defenders have given me more hope in 2 weeks than the Redskins have given me in 5 years. Simple as that. Their starting quarterback, Cardale Jones, is 13-0 as a starter in professional and college play. He is absolutely nutty. He has good fundamentals. His arm strength is insane. His accuracy is amazing. The offense actually pulled off a very cool trick play in week 1. It was like a double or triple flea flicker, and then he threw it to an open receiver. The thing that makes this DC, there's multiple things that make this DC team a very scary team, and one of them kind of emerged this last week. They have a 3-headed monster in the receiving core. Rashad Ross, who was the AAF's number 1 receiver last year, DeAndre Tompkins, who came back from an injury from week 1, and then Eli Rogers. God bless Eli Rogers, because he played in the previous game. His mom just died, and he skipped her funeral so he could play in the game, and he had a nice game this last week. He did very well, but it takes real courage to do that. So Tompkins, Ross, Rogers. Keep those 3 names in mind. Those are all the weapons that Cardale Jones has around him. And then the DC Defenders are called the Defenders simply because they can defend. They've had pick sixes. Well, I shouldn't say that. They've had defensive touchdowns each week. They blocked a punt for a touchdown in week 1. They've forced at least 3 turnovers each game. And the games that they have played have not even been close. Game number 1, I believe they won something like 31-19 against Seattle. And then they fooled the Guardians. They made fools out of them. 27-0 was the final. They made Matt McGloin look like a freshman in college with a new team. It was just an embarrassment for the Guardians, but for the Defenders, it has been absolutely amazing. They are number 1 in my rankings. I put them above Houston only because of their defense. Honestly, I think Houston has a much better offense, but just from what I have seen from the DC Defenders, their defense is just absolutely suffocating. It is unlike anything I have ever seen at a professional level at the start of a season. And it's ridiculous how well they've done. Ooh, I've been running for a little bit. I thought today would be a nice change of pace from Pokemon. For those of you regulars around here, for those of you coming for the XFL content, welcome. I am hoping to do more of this later. I thought this would be a nice change of pace. I'm going to get back to the Pokemon grind next video. So thank you guys for sitting and listening to me talk for a little bit about the XFL, which has me super excited, and I hope it excites you guys too. Thank you for watching. I hope you'll join me next time. Bye-bye.